The Parsha this morning asks us to consider the relationship between religion and ethics. It's a very old question and not an easy question to answer. Religion and ethics. What we do here, you might say, how we behave day to day with other people. Some believe that religion is a very bedrock of ethics. They say that if you don't have religion that's there to guide us, to tell us what's right and what's wrong, we'd all be completely lost. That's one end of the spectrum. There are others who believe that ethics is about more humanistic assumptions, justified mainly, if not always, by appealing to reason. There are two extreme views. They tend to be argued in a way, unfortunately, that leaves little room for compromise. You're on one side or the other. It makes it very difficult to come up with compromises when there are real moral challenges that face us every day. Religion and ethics. It's really about the relationship between revelation, what we call revelation, and reason. Religion is based on the idea that we need God to reveal certain insights about life and about meaning, and that those insights are collected in holy texts. For us, it's the Torah. For Muslims, it's the Quran. For Christians, it's the Bible. But it's all revelation, what God tells us is good and right. Ethics, if you speak to somebody who has a more humanistic perspective, is based on the tenets of reason. Anything that I cannot justify and reason out rationally, verify it rationally, can't be considered real, can't be considered to matter, can't be considered conclusive. From that perspective, ethical principles need not derive their authority from religious doctrine, obviously. They're upheld for their own value because they promote independent and responsible people making decisions for themselves, living together in harmony, and we don't need religion for that. Well, what does Judaism say? Which one is the true response? I mean, it's not difficult. We really wouldn't be here if we didn't feel that religion wasn't important in defining what's good and what's right in the world. Just a few weeks, we're going to commemorate Shavuot. Shavuot is the holiday where we receive the Torah. Well, why would God give us the Torah if we could just figure everything out ourselves anyway? In Judaism, we certainly see that it's possible for people to arrive at moral boundaries based on reason. But hasn't history shown that the mind is not always the most dependable instrument of truth? It's very easy and very common for people to be deluded into believing that something unethical or immoral is just the opposite. We should never forget that Germany in the 1930s was a nation that was known, perhaps more than any other, as a country that championed reason and logic. And look who they elected, and look what they were capable of. Despite our belief in a divine ethical code, our sages did observe that there were different categories of mitzvot. Some commandments are called Mishpatim, natural laws. These are laws that we would have figured out on our own, even if the Torah hadn't been given. Don't steal, don't murder. We're not the only society in the world that believes in those principles. But we also have laws that are placed in the category of chukim, statutes, or edot, testimonies. Things like keeping kosher, keeping Shabbat. If the Torah hadn't commanded us in these mitzvot, we would not have figured out Shabbat or Kashrut and many, many other mitzvot on our own. But what's interesting is when you look in the parsha that we read this morning, Parashat Kedoshim, the distinction between the two kinds of mitzvot, the ones that we call natural law and others that you might call ritual law, those distinctions are not there. If anything, it seems that the Torah is deliberately confounding or mixing up the two. Kedoshim means what? Kedoshim to you, be holy. And the Torah gives us many, many examples in the ensuing verses on what holiness means, to explain what holiness means. And it's all over the place. It starts with religious laws, revering parents, observing Shabbat, refraining from idolatry. But in the same breath almost, the Torah talks about giving to the poor, providing for the needs of the widow and the orphan, how to ethically treat our employees, make sure they get their wages on time. It's all one big jumble, one big mix, which leads, I think, to two easy lessons that I want to submit to you today for your consideration. One may be a bit more obvious, one less obvious, but maybe more important. The first, more obvious lesson is that holiness does not allow for the compartmentalization of the religious persona. This debate, reason versus revelation, ethics versus religion, it is irrelevant for us. We are learning in our faith about a faith that is maximalist. It's about everything. You need ritual that is rooted in ethics and ethics that is rooted in ritual. To be holy means to be just as careful in the way you treat other people as you are careful about the things you eat, the tefillin that you put on. You need both. You need a blend. It's almost like you're putting together a tapestry. And if you want a tapestry that's really strong and more enduring than an individual thread alone, you need to weave both together. It's an obvious lesson. But what's the lesson that's less obvious? I think it's nice to think that we can all sew that tapestry of religion and ethics together in the same way. But the reality is, we each sew a different tapestry depending on our individual preferences, depending on our strengths and our weaknesses. We all know how people work. You have Jews who are very stringent about the ethical laws, but about the religious laws, they don't care so much. And there are other Jews who are super, super careful about the religious laws, but then they cheat and steal in all sorts of different ways. You have Jews who are stringent about some halacha, but not about others. The idea that we each sew the same tapestry just because we say we care about the same two things is a bit naive. We're all going to sew our lives together differently, depending on our strengths, and most of us fit somewhere in the middle, acknowledging the importance of ethics and ritual, but emphasizing both in different ways. In the real world, we set our own priorities. We're strong in some areas, weak in others. Perhaps the lesson of Parashat Kedoshim and this jumbling of religion and ethics together is to recognize not just that both are important, but that the path to holiness will look different for different people. Not only to recognize that, but to celebrate it, to value it, to appreciate it. That Kedoshim to you means we should be respectful of people who come at things from a different place and make conclusions that are different than ours. Kedoshim Tihiyu, be holy. But that's actually not the full translation. In the English, you miss the fact that Kedoshim is a commandment given in the plural. It doesn't mean be a holy person. Kedoshim to you means be a holy people. Maybe the commandment is given in the plural just to remind us about the lesson that we're each going to come to Judaism from different places, with different emphases, and that we each have the potential to augment our deficiencies and each other's deficiencies with our own contributions. And that's not about creating our own spiritual tapestry, but about making a tapestry together, augmenting each other's deficiencies, as I said, and making our own individual contributions. Why do I think this lesson is important? At the first Rosh Hashanah, after the pandemic started, I gave a sermon about the tremendous temptations to judge other people negatively based on decisions that they were making about their lives, and in particular about how they were going to navigate this danger. The temptations to judge. 2.5 years later, and I don't know about you, but sadly, within many families, within many communities, within many schools, we've seen how the temptation to judge has split apart many units that were once more whole, ripped many tapestries that were once sewn strongly together. We sometimes have tunnel vision in identifying what we consider to be true and right. We use our own particularized lens. We only see our blend, our defined parameters. This is how you navigate the pandemic properly, and anything outside of those parameters is treif, or reckless, or fanaticism. 2.5 years later, are you all ready for all that to come to an end? Not just the pandemic. I know we're all ready for that to come to an end. But the units that were once whole, the tapestries that were once woven closely together, are you tired of being apart? Tired of seeing the friction, the splitting, the judgment? I'm tired of it. I think, for me, this is a lesson that speaks powerfully about knitting our tapestries together. We would do well to remember that that is a model that the Torah calls Kedoshim Tihiyu, what it means to be a holy community. It is not just about a holistic embrace of all of Judaism, the ethics and the religion. It is about an embrace of different people who will emphasize different things and have different perspectives. The person who strives for holiness sees value, even celebrates the many different ways that there are to reach Hashem, to find God, to find truth, even, especially, the ones that run contrary to her own chosen path. May we succeed in our aspirations toward holiness. Attempt to knit in the coming months and years a stronger tapestry together as a community, with a good sense of balance as a people that will lead us together to a redeemed and better world. Shabbat Shalom.